Okay, Alvin, it's all yours.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alvin Delovich, and I want to thank you for joining us for this very special ADATH event tonight. Everyone has a story, a virtual monthly lecture series to get to know some of our ADATH members on a more familiar level. Tonight's presentation is the first one in our series, with plans at the present time for 5 more. Please make sure you view them here first before they hit Netflix. Your support is so greatly appreciated on behalf of the ADATH. I sincerely hope that you enjoy the story that the Honourable Lawrence Bergman will be sharing with us for the next 45 minutes. Lawrence will have a Q&A at the end of his lecture, so please add your questions to the chat as he is speaking, and they will be answered at the end of his presentation. Before I continue, I want to thank the officers for their support in making this happen and their belief in the program. Also, a big thank you to Rabbi Whitman and Stu Gutman for their hard work and efforts behind the stage to make this happen in the new normal age of Zoom. Also, anybody else who would like to share their story, please get in touch with me through the shul. And now a few words about our speaker. Lawrence obtained a law degree from University of Montreal in 1964 and was admitted to the Board of Notaries in 1965. He was elected as the member of the National Assembly for Darcy McGee in the general provincial election on September the 12th, 1994. He was re-elected in the provincial elections of November 30th, 1998, April 14th, 2003, March 26, 2007, December the 8th, 2008, and September the 4th, 2012. Quite a successful run, I must say. Lawrence was named Minister of Revenue of the province of Quebec on April the 29th, 2003. In 2007, he was named Chair of the Government Caucus. And on October 21st, 1991, Lawrence introduced Bill 198 in the National Assembly, an act to proclaim Holocaust Yom HaShoah Memorial Day in Quebec. This bill was subsequently adopted unanimously by the National Assembly. In 1999, Lawrence was awarded the Jerusalem Award for the Mayor of Jerusalem, the World Zionist Organization, and the Canadian Zionist Federation Eastern Region in recognition of his outstanding dedication and service to the State of Israel and the Jewish community. In 2012, the Jewish General Hospital presented the Distinguished Service Award to Lawrence. This award is the hospital's highest honor, which is presented each year to an individual who has had a profound impact on the development of the hospital. In 2013, he was the recipient of the Medal of Honor of the Chambre des Notaires de Québec in recognition of his exceptional contribution to the profession. And in the year 2014, Lawrence was named an honorary member of the Board of Notaries of the province of Quebec. Certainly, in my opinion, a very impressive resume. It is now my pleasure to present to you Lawrence Bergman.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you for your kind words. Dear friends, I'm honored to have been asked by the ADATH Israel Paul Tzedek Anshe Azaroff congregation to speak about my years as an M&A in the National Assembly and as a cabinet minister. I'm honored that you've all come online to listen to these words, and I hope that you're all well and staying safe. I would firstly like to speak to you about Ezekiel Hart and Sarah and Jack Karpman. Why them? Because events in their lifetime were part of the bedrock of my principles, which guided me during my years in the National Assembly. Ezekiel Hart, a Jewish person, twice elected to the then Legislative Assembly of Lower Canada for the constituency of Three Rivers. Firstly, in the election of 11th of April, 1807, and secondly, in the election of the 17th of May, 1808. On both of those occasions, he was expelled from the assembly by the speaker for the sole reason that he did not want to take the oath of office on the New Testament. However, on June 5, 1832, the Legislative Assembly adopted a law giving Jewish people equality and full political and religious emancipation. Mr. Hart was again elected in a subsequent election, and the rest is history. Of course, he took his oath of office on the Old Testament. Sarah and Jack Cartman, a young couple, decided to open up a general store. They decided to open up a general store in a small town called Saint Perpetu. Now, to guide you geographically, if you go along the south shore of the St. Lawrence River, you come to a town called Saint Jean Port Joli. You might have visited there at one time. There you turn south and you head to Saint Perpetu. But if you blink on your way, you'll probably miss the village. It's so small. They opened up a general store, and at the beginning, this young Jewish couple had no business. They just said, well, we might as well go back to Montreal. And Sarah said to Jack, why don't you go to the parish priest and tell him about our problem, and then we'll go home. So Jack went to see the parish priest, and that Sunday, the following Sunday, the priest gave a sermon entitled, "The Sun Shines for All." Thereafter, the store became busy, and the rest was history. On June 5, 2002, on the 170th anniversary of the Law of 1832, Premier Bernard Laundrie and Sarah and Jack Cartman's grandson, Lawrence Bergman, who was then a member of the Quebec National Assembly, made a joint motion in the Quebec National Assembly celebrating this special law of 1832. Mr. Hart, of course, inspired me as a Jew. He inspired me for the position that he took as a Jew. The parish priest gave that sermon entitled "The Sun Shines for All." And that's something that I talked about many, many times in my career in the National Assembly, that all Quebecers, whether those who were born here, those who have chosen to come to our shores, no matter what their religion, the color of the skin, the language they speak, their culture, are all equal, have equal rights and equal obligations. I would now like to speak to you about a couple of vignettes of my career in the National Assembly. Firstly, I'd like to speak to you about Bill 198. Alvin just mentioned the bill, an act to proclaim Holocaust Yom HaShoah Memorial Day in Quebec, adopted by the Quebec National Assembly on December 15, 1999. Each year when I was elected after I was elected to the Assembly, I made a motion on Yom HaShoah. But I wanted to do something a little more permanent. So I decided that I would like to draft a bill, and have it adopted by the Quebec National Assembly. My party at that time was in opposition, so that was a little more difficult. So at the beginning of the year 1999, I paid a visit to the office of our leader, our chef, Jean Charest, told him what I wanted to do, and he said to me in a non-committal way, well, you know, you should go to the pre-sessional caucus, which will be held shortly in Brownsburg, near Lachute. I left his office sort of a little discouraged, not knowing where I stood, but I decided to follow what he suggested. I got hold of the caucus chairman, and he said, sure, I'll put you on the agenda. I'll put you on the agenda for the last item on Friday. You should know that pre-sessional caucuses start on Thursday, and you go all day Thursday with many, many items which are coming up, bills which are coming up in the National Assembly. And it's long discussions which start 9 o'clock in the morning and go till 9, 10 o'clock at night, Thursday night. Friday, there's the miscellaneous items, but the Friday's caucus must end at noon hour because the leader, the chef, holds a press conference in order for the press that's gathered there to get the lines and get the quotes for that evening's news. So being told that I was the last item on the agenda, which would be probably around 11:45, I was a little discouraged because I thought, well, if this caucus runs a little late, my item will never get on. And by 11:30, 11:45, the M&As of the caucus get a little bit unruly. Some even start their cars with the automatic starter to get out of there as soon as possible when we're let go at noon hour. Precisely at 11:45, the caucus chairman said, Laurence, you have something to discuss with us. And I said to myself, Lawrence, be short, be succinct, and be to the point, because at 12 o'clock, this caucus ends. I made my presentation. And after the presentation, the first applause that I heard came from Jean Charest. And of course, it's a career-enhancing move for the members of the caucus present to applaud and to go along with his wishes at that caucus. And so with that applause, in a caucus, there's never a vote. You never have a vote. It's the caucus chairman who will decide if there's a consensus. And the caucus chairman, in words I'll never forget, he said, Laurence, go ahead. And so that was in January of 1999. It took about 6-7 months with the legislative people in Quebec City to get that bill drafted, because these people check every comma, every letter. They also check bills of that nature, if there are any across the world. And finally, I was able to present this bill in the National Assembly in the early fall of 1999. And the bill went through the various stages that a bill has to go through in the Assembly. And then I was waiting for the final call for the bill to be called for adoption, which is the final step to get a bill passed. Every day I would check with our House leader, who at that time was Pierre Paradis. And he said, I don't know. They have the right to call when they want. I knew if it wouldn't be called in 1999 and go over the winter holidays, my bill would get lost. Every day I'd be checking with Pierre. And finally, on December 15th, 1999, I came down to the Assembly for question period, which is the beginning of the day's work in the Assembly. And Pierre motions to me, your bill's going to be called after the question period. I was delighted. Now, you should also know that for question period, the Speaker of the House does not start the question period until the Premier is in his seat. It's a little like in synagogue. The Chazan will not repeat the Amida until he sees that the rabbi has completed his davening of the Amida. Same thing here. The Speaker waits till the Premier, at that time was Lucien Bouchard. But Lucien Bouchard came in that day. Instead of going to his seat, he went across to see Jean Charest. They speak for a few minutes, and I took notice of it. And then Mr. Charest calls me to come over and see him at his seat. And he said, Lucien just spoke to me and said that they're prepared to put up the bill for adoption today, but they would like you to agree to take one of their members as a co-sponsor of the bill. And Mr. Charest was very, very fair. He said, it's up to you, it's your call. But if I was you, I would say yes, because you could be sure that the bill will be called today. And I did say yes. By coincidence, the M&A who was sponsoring the bill for the Parti Québécois was a fellow called André Boulleris, who had told me that he thought that his grandmother was Jewish. Just a little aside. In any case, bills are called for adoption right after question period. Question period finishes. Now, there's two ways in which a bill can be called for adoption. Either by the speaker asking both leaders of both parties, adopte, and if both leaders say yes, then he has no reason to not say the bill's adopted, because you have the leaders representing both of the parties in the assembly at that time, which was the Liberal Party in opposition and the Parti Québécois. Or you can call a bill by appel nominal. Appel nominal means that the speaker will say all those in favor, and then the clerk of the House will start calling names, starting from the premier right through the House. It's like a chain. It goes very quickly. There's 125 members, so you'll say all those in favor, and then the clerk will start calling names. If you're in favor of the bill, you stand up. If you're not, you don't. And just as he called the bill, the speaker, our leader called for a vote par appel nominal, which means that you really have to stand up, and it goes on the record that you did vote for the bill. I could tell you that in my mind, and I'll always remember sitting in the assembly and watching each member of the assembly standing up as the name was called, voting for this bill. Also, it's a tradition in the assembly, when it comes to the person who sponsored the bill, there's a standing ovation for that person. And of course, when it came to me, the assembly stood up and applauded. I can't tell you the emotion that went through my body at that moment, thinking that 6 million of my brothers and sisters were murdered for the sole reason that they were Jewish. And here, a Quebec National Assembly, which means the population of Quebec, is standing up to back and support this bill. It was a moment of great emotion for me. I also want to point out to you that the bills get numbers by the legal department of the Assembly in basically a haphazard way. This bill was Bill 198. When I had seen the number of the bill, if you add the 1 and the 9 and the 8, you have 18, which is high. When I saw that number and I saw the high, I knew that something good was going to happen and that bill was meant to be. I could also tell you that that bill was one of the first of its kind in the Western Hemisphere to be adopted. I'm very proud of that bill. The second item I'd like to discuss with you, which was in the news as of this past week, is called L'Affaire Michaud, which happened on December 14 in the year 2000. Yves Michaud, a 71-year-old, very fiery, very nationalist, a separatist of all parts of his thinking, and someone who wanted to become a candidate for the Parti Québécois in a forthcoming by-election. This was the person I'm talking about. The story begins on December 5th in a local barbershop. Mr. Michaud comes in and meets a Jewish liberal senator, Leo Kolber, who was a good friend of mine, who passed away in the last year. And of course, they get to talking politics. They recognize and know each other. And at one point, Mr. Michaud says to Leo Kolber, "It's always about you. You're the only people in the world to have suffered in the story of humankind in a very sarcastic manner. On December 13th, a couple of days later, at the Estates General, a panel discussing the French language, Mr. Michaud goes even further, and out of nowhere on the panel starts complaining about the ethnic votes in Côte-Saint-Luc during the referendum. As you know, news travels fast in Quebec, and the next morning, our caucus was at 8 o'clock in the morning, and this item comes up. Mr. Charette turns to me and says, right after caucus, come up to my office and we'll draft a motion indicating that those words were unacceptable. Now you should know at that time of the year, the caucus is at 8 o'clock in the morning and question period is at 10 o'clock in the morning. So things move rather rapidly. I went up to his office and we start drafting a motion saying that the words of Mr. Michaud were unacceptable. At one point, Mr. Charette turns to me with a sort of a twinkle and says, why don't you call your good friend Andre Boulris on the government side and see if they'll support the motion, which was highly unlikely because Mr. Michaud was going to become a candidate for the Parti Québécois in a forthcoming by-election. I call Mr. Boulris, and he doesn't say no. He says to me, call me back in exactly 5 minutes. I call back in 5 minutes, and he says, yes, I spoke to the Premier, Lucien Bouchard, and they'll support the motion, and we'll make a joint motion together in the National Assembly right after question period this morning. We were very surprised, but we presented the motion after question period, and the motion was adopted unanimously. Not only adopted unanimously, but again, it was a vote par appel nominal, which meant that every member of the Assembly stood up and supported the motion. Mr. Michaud, when he found out about it, was furious. He had very close personal friends in the Parti Québécois caucus, especially Bernard Landry. They were close personal friends. These people worked together on the separatist movement for years and years. Mr. Michaud blamed the 4 Bs. Who were the 4 Bs? Bouchard, Benet-Brith, Bergman, and Boulris. And for a long time after that, there were articles and op-eds in the papers discussing why the PQ had gone along with the motion. Bernard Landry saying, well, he was sorry, he didn't know what he voted for, all kinds of stories. But the motion stuck. That was in December. In January of that year, during the Christmas break, Lucien Bouchard decided to call all the members of his caucus by telephone and to discuss with them various aspects of their feeling of nationalism, of separation. And one of the things he did discuss with them is the question of ethnic votes. It was bothering him very, very much why someone would say that one vote is not worth as much as another vote. Why were the votes in Darcy McGee not worth as much as votes elsewhere? He spent apparently most of the holidays making those phone calls. And sometime in January, February, when the House reconvened after the holidays, Mr. Bouchard, Lucien Bouchard, the Premier of Quebec, stood up and indicated that as of that day, he was resigning as Premier and resigning his seat in the National Assembly. And this is confirmed by a letter that Mr. Bouchard wrote, which I have here in the House. It was published in La Presse. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Charette after that would call me the Bergmanator. So, you know, you put these things aside, and this was in the year 2000, 20 years ago. About three weeks ago, I get an email from someone saying, you know, there's a movement to have that motion struck down on the 20th anniversary of its adoption. Who's doing it? It was old-time PQ members who were circulating petitions, and they had the Parti Québécois and the members in the Assembly convinced that they would do it on this past December 14th, 2000. I got a hold of some friends in the Liberal caucus, of course, and they said there's no way we'll support it. And a motion of that nature would take the support of all the parties in the House, which would be the PQ, the CAQ, and the Liberal Party. And as a matter of fact, on the morning of December 14, I got a call here early in the morning from two friends in the caucus. Said, don't worry, we're going to caucus now, but the party is holding fast. We're going to vote. We won't approve the motion. Luckily, on the same day, the CAQ did not approve the motion. I'm told one of the reasons they didn't approve the motion is that the Premier, Legault, owes his political career to Lucien Bouchard and felt that he would not let that motion go through to have the motion of 2000 rescinded. So it's interesting that even 20 years later, things are still in play and ideas are still in play. I'd like to discuss with you April 14, 2003. You might remember that date. The Quebec Liberal Party wins the general election. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday night, my phone rings. It's someone from the office of Jean Charest, who was the Premier-elect at that moment, saying, could you be at the Sheraton Hotel on Reine-l'Évêque tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the lobby? Please don't tell anybody that you got this call. Of course, what happens when your party wins the election? The elected MNAs, it's always mentioned, sit by their phone, waiting for that call. Because when the call comes in, you know the reason for the call. You're probably going to be asked to join the cabinet. The next morning, in secrecy, I appeared at the lobby of the Sheraton Hotel, was brought upstairs to various offices to be asked questions about ethics and economic holdings to make sure that there was nothing that could impede my nomination as a minister. And then I met with Jean Charest, who asked me if I would accept the nomination to be the Minister of Revenue of the province of Quebec. I knew from that moment that my life would change for the next 4 years. On the Tuesday following that Sunday, I appeared in Quebec City. We were told to meet in a lobby next to the Red Room of the National Assembly in secret, where we would be called into the Red Room to be sworn in one at a time. At that time, we saw all the other prospective ministers who would be sworn in. And I could tell you, we were all very nervous. I could tell you my hands were just sweating. I don't know why, but I put my hands in my suit jacket pocket and I felt my kippa, and somehow my hands stopped sweating. One at a time, we were called into an antechamber of the Red Room, where members of the protocol were there to send us into the Red Room to be sworn in. When my turn came up to be called to meet a member of the protocol team, I saw through the door the heavy, heavy lights, and you could see hundreds of people waiting for you to come in to be sworn in. And the lady from protocol is brushing off my suit and says to me, you know, you should be smiling. Today will be one of the most beautiful days of your life. What I couldn't tell that lady, that day was Yom HaShoah. And here I'd be walking over the threshold into a room filled with 500 people to be sworn in on a chumash given to me by Rabbi Bender at ADATH Israel when I was bar mitzvahed. And that day was Yom HaShoah. I couldn't tell her that. And that was an extraordinary moment of my career in the assembly. I wore, of course, a kippah to be sworn in. And I have to tell you that the newspaper Le Soleil in Quebec City, whenever there was an article about me as a minister in the years to come, and they showed my picture with the article, they would always show the picture of me wearing the kippah. They made sure that when their photographer took the picture, the angle the picture was taken at would show the kippah. As Minister of Revenue, I had 13,000 employees across the province, and I toured the province to visit our various branches throughout Quebec. I could tell you also that in Quebec City, when you're named a minister, the city treats you like someone special. Like from one day to the next, you're different. I used to stay at the Hilton Hotel and go to the breakfast room every day for my breakfast before I went to the assembly. Of course, you come to the breakfast room and you gather your breakfast together and you go sit down. The next day when I was named a minister, the fellow who's there and was there my whole career said, no, come with me. I have a table for you. At the table were the newspapers. At the table was what I usually had for breakfast. At the table was coffee. And it was like a different story. Your name is Monsieur the Minister. You're no more Lawrence Bergman. So just a couple little vignettes as minister. Food. Ministers in Quebec City from time to time are invited to lunch and receptions or evening receptions to say a few words. And the first time I went to a reception, there were pork chops were put in front of me in a plate. I don't eat pork chops. And so I just didn't have anything. When I came back to my office, I told my assistant, could you make sure the next time I'm invited that I'm not served pork chops, if you can do it in a polite manner. What would you like, Mr. Bergman? I said, you know what? Salmon is the easiest thing and it's the safest thing. So for the rest of my time in Quebec City, my chief of staff would call me the king of salmon. Still on the food items, every year the ministry, the high-ranking executives, about 150, 175 people, have a reception for the Christmas holidays. They hold it in a downtown hotel. So of course the minister is invited. My car pulls up to the hotel. God forbid the minister should go by himself up to the reception. There's 5 people waiting for me at the curb to take me upstairs. And in the elevator, one lady says to me, Monsieur le Ministre, I got you your special wine. I'm saying, look, I don't even know this lady. How, and I'm not a wine drinker. What exactly did she get from me? When I come upstairs, of course, she takes me with pride to the table with the wines and the liquor. And I see a bottle of Manischewitz wine. And she pours me a glass like this high. Now, Manischewitz wine is a good wine, but I'm not sure if you could drink a whole glass of Manischewitz wine. Luckily, one of my assistants who was with me that day sort of caught on and took the glass from me. But it showed you the sense of respect that they were offering. But not all was salmon steaks, because I did a lot of aller tours in my time in Quebec City, meaning I would leave Quebec on a Wednesday at 4 o'clock, be driven to Montreal, do 3 events, and come back to Quebec that night. My first event I would come to, the main course was not being served yet. I'd have to leave and go to my second event. The main course had been served. You're too late for the main course. When it came to my third event, we're not ready for dessert yet. And at that point, it's 11 o'clock at night. I had 2 hours to go, two or 3 hours to go to get back to Quebec City. So my chauffeur would stop with regularity. At the first stop on the autoroute, I buy myself 2 chocolate bars or a chocolate bar and a May West to have on the way back. That was my supper also. So that was also habit forming. I've been asked about anti-Semitism in Quebec City, and anti-Semitism when I was a minister. My deputy minister, who a minister has a deputy minister and chief of staff, and they're very, very helpful. She comes to me one day and she says, I have a letter here which is very anti-Semitic, addressed to you and being passed around to employees. I could have this person fired immediately if you wish. And I decided on the spot, no. I said, go and just explain this person what this person has done wrong, why it is so wrong to be anti-Semitic. And I took that chance, and I have to tell you, I never heard another word about it. I don't know who the person was, and nothing ever happened after in an anti-Semitic manner. Humor. The government legislated an item when I was Minister of Revenue, whereby people over 70 years old could claim certain expenses on their income tax return, such as how much you pay for the gardener, and get a certain credit, because we wanted to make sure that people over 70 stayed in their own homes, so we'd help them with the expenses. And it was decided that I would make a tour of various small towns and go to a meeting held in a church basement in a community hall, meet with 50 or 60 seniors over 70 years old, and explain this provision in the law, which was helpful for seniors. The ministry always sent, not with me, but the person would be there, a technical person from the ministry if there was a question which is highly technical, which I would maybe need help on. I come to one spot, and I'll never forget my life. An elderly lady stands up because I explained the provision, and it was a question period. And she says to me in French, I don't know how I could claim it. I don't have any receipt. Well, I answer her, well, you'll ask your gardener to give you a receipt. Whereupon the answer was, I pay my gardener in cash. Now, go tell your Minister of Revenue that you're paying someone in cash. The person with me from the ministry, I'll never forget. I thought she would choke. She was bursting of laughing that she thought it was like, and then she sent me a little note, leave her go. Don't try to explain more because she won't understand. Let's leave this go. And not that we would accept that proposition, but we couldn't really explain her why you don't pay cash and expect to get a tax benefit. So that was a humorous moment. Security. I had a bodyguard with me from the time I woke up in the morning, left the house or left the hotel, till the time I was brought back to the house or brought back to the hotel. Usually they would leave me off at the hotel in Quebec City. Once when there were labor disputes, so the bodyguard would just come up in the elevator and make sure that I got into the hotel room with no problem. But one morning, it was in my Montreal office, my chief of staff says to me, sit down, I have to tell you something. Somebody wants to kill you today. He's already called the office. What's the problem? The problem is that the income tax law says that the minister does this, the minister does that, the minister seizes your house. And he had a seizure in his house the day before, which says the minister is going to seize your house. And so that particular day, my bodyguard was like 3 inches away from me the whole day. My last stop of the day was a dinner at night. When I came out of the dinner, he announced to me, in Quebec City, the police found this person, they questioned him, but they let him go because they didn't think it was a high risk. Well, okay, so that wasn't easy to take, but it happened. And so my years as a minister was really a great privilege. I'd like to talk to you about Pavilion K at the Jewish General Hospital. This was when we were obviously still in government. I got a call from the hospital, from the Director General. If I could come to a meeting, they had a project in mind. I come to the meeting and the Director General was there with Stephen Cummings, who was a good friend of mine, a supporter of my years in politics, and we became very good friends. And they said, we want to build a new pavilion attached to the hospital. How much will it cost? Oh, about $400 million. I say to myself, where am I going to find $400 million? I'm sitting in cabinet. I know how tough it is to find a dollar, and we're trying to cut down our expenses. And you know, there's also a competition amongst ministers for dollars, because every minister has a project in his riding, or he's being chased after by an M&A in the caucus for a project in their riding. As a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead a moment. When my project started becoming a reality, another minister who we're good friends says, why is he getting it? Why am I not getting it? It becomes a great, great competition. When you have a project of this nature, the importance of personal relationships with the ministers who will sign off on the file is very important. Of course, the person who will sign off on the file, the most important, is the Premier, Jean Charest. And I always had his ear on problems facing the Jewish community. When there was the fire at the UTT in Saint Laurent, he was that morning in Rimouski, and I was able to call him at 7 o'clock in the morning and explain him the problem, and he agreed to come with me to visit the ruins after the fire. He was always available for the community. There were 3 other ministers who I had to have their attention for this file. First of all, there was the Minister of the Treasury Board, Michelle Courchaine, who she once told me, Laurence, if you talk to me one more time about this file, I'm going to explode, because I was really just staying in touch with her more than I could. The second minister was Raymond Bachand, who was the Minister of Finance. And of course, he was the one who had the purse strings with the Treasury Board minister. And then a key minister is the Minister of Health, Yves Bolduc. So I decided that Yves Bolduc is an M&A for the Lac Saint-Jean region. I didn't think that he had visited Montreal on many occasions before he became a minister, and I didn't think he'd ever visit the Jewish General Hospital. So I arranged I tried to see if I can get him to come to the hospital. I had to negotiate this with his chief of staff in Quebec City and his appointment secretary. Finally, after weeks of calling, she said to me, Monsieur Bergman, I could arrange it on this coming Monday at 11:15, but you have to promise me that he'll be back in his car at 12 o'clock, because I'm sending him somewhere else and I don't have a minute to lose. You have 1 hour and 15 minutes. And you should know that when a minister comes to a hospital like the Jewish General or any other place, you time his visit to the second. You time who he's going to speak to, who he's going to see, where you're going to bring him, because you want to take advantage of every minute that he's in the hospital. That particular day, we met Yves Bolduc at the entranceway of the hospital, and we took him around. One of the places that we went to was the ICU. At the ICU, there was a bed which was empty. Between ourselves, we have a way of sort of relieving the tension and kidding about certain things which are just a joke. And he turns to me, Yves Bolduc, when we're in the ICU, and he whispers loudly, you told me that there's overcrowding, but here you have an empty bed. What's your problem? A nurse executive who was on the tour of the hospital says, no, 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 no. It's a lady from Lac Saint Jean, and we took her down for x-rays. I don't say not anything, but I sort of was a little concerned. We continue the whole tour, and the last item on the tour is the boardroom of the hospital, where Hartley Stern, the executive director, is there, and questions and discussion. And I see I have like 10 minutes to go to get him into that car to fulfill my promise. At which point, Eve turns to me and whispers to me, I'd like to go back to see the lady from Lac Saint Jean. I don't know what to do. I tell Hartley Stern, our director general, and he looks at me like I'm crazy because he doesn't know the whole story. His eyes like, what is going on? Anyways, finally, he gives instructions, and not as great as entourage, and we're going to go back to see this lady in the ICU. At this point, I know that perhaps there's going to be a problem. If she, the lady, says something, I'm not happy here, I'm not being treated well here, but no one's speaking the proper language to me, this whole file that I've worked on so much is going to be in trouble. What happened next, I'll always remember for the rest of my life. As we come to the ICU, Eve turns to me and says, let me go to the bedside by myself, just stand back a few feet. I go there with him to the ICU, and he goes to the woman's bed, and they both, the woman and him, they're like, you see how they're flushed in their face, and she takes his hand, he takes her hand like a bubby to a grandson, like a grandmother to a grandson, and she's holding his hand and he's holding her hands. And obviously, she knows him as probably her doctor from Lac Saint Jean, because she's addressing him as docteur. And she says to him in French, don't worry about me. You're too busy now. I'm being very well treated here. On me traite très bien ici. On est bien ici. And they're still holding hands. And then he says goodbye to her. And he walks out, and I know that there was a big emotion, because from there we went to the car. He didn't say one word to me. When he came downstairs, went to the car, we shook hands, says, I'll see you tomorrow in Quebec City. I signaled to his driver, his bodyguard. I said, I'm late, I promise you. They said, don't worry. And when the car pulled out, the driver put the red light on and got him to the next stop. But it was an amazing moment that had happened, which I'll never forget in my life. Of course, we still hadn't spoken to the premier. I hadn't spoken to the premier about the file. I get a call late in December when the assembly is not sitting. The premier will see you in Quebec this Thursday morning. Now, I could tell you, at that time of the year, at the National Assembly, not even the superintendent comes in. It's so quiet. There's no lights on, so quiet. I go there, and there waiting in the premier's office is Raymond Bachon. And on the phone is Yves Bolduc. And again, I prepared my presentation, and I knew we didn't have that much time to make my presentation. And Mr. Charest, in a billowing voice, says, Raymond, what do you say? And Raymond says, I have the money. You can go ahead if you want. And then yells into the phone to Yves Bolduc, Yves, what do you think? And Mr. Bolduc also said, I approve. And that was the beginning of the construction of Pavilion K, which is the pavilion which has single patient rooms, new operating theaters, new emergency wards, and which will serve Jewish and non-Jewish people for years and years and years to come. Just a little bit of irony. When there's an announcement of that much money, of $400 million, in politics, it's announced 5 times. You announce it when the hole is being dug for the building. You announce it when the first floor comes up. You have a number of press conferences. But of course, the press conference, which is the most important, is when the hospital is finally built. Ironically, when one of the last press conferences, my party was no longer in power and we were in opposition, and the PQ was in power. The minister was a minister called Hebert. And when I went to the press conference, I sat, of course, in the audience and watched with great delight. But of course, I wasn't part of the announcement. And it was a great moment also to have that Pavilion K being built with whatever I was able to accomplish to have it done. In conclusion, I talked to you about caucus a number of times. As I told you, there is never a vote in caucus. Caucus works by consensus. Consensus is determined by the caucus chairman. Of course, he usually has the prime minister at his side. The chef of the party, of course, has the last word. A caucus is a wonderful blending of people and ideas. There are M&As who are there from rural ridings, from city ridings. There are there those who speak only French. There are some English-speaking M&As. There's different levels of education, different levels of business. There's also different religions. Sometimes only one Jew is at the table, but there's a blending of thinking, and thinking can be very different. And when an item is discussed, everybody puts their thoughts at the table, and what comes out is usually a fantastic policy which can be put forward. I've seen people cry at caucus reunions. I've seen serious discussion, but a caucus is an amazing, amazing process. I've been asked if I'm in touch with M&As from the years when I served. We're a group of us, of about 10 of us. Most of us were ministers, and we get together for lunch every 6 to 8 weeks. And we have amazing discussions comparing when we were there to what's going on now and what we accomplished. And it's a brotherhood which is very, very, very interesting and gratifying. And so, in conclusion, I was really very lucky to have been able to have the privilege of serving in the National Assembly for 20 years. And this really is a great privilege. I thank you very much. If there's any questions, so I have a question from Sid Melech. When will you be writing a book about your experiences? Soon. I hope it will be fascinating. So I don't think that I'll be writing a book, Sid, but you might be interested to know that I started a scrapbook when I was first nominated to run for the Quebec Liberal Party in 1993. And in some way, I kept up that scrapbook. I have about 35 editions here at our home in Saint-Agathe. And perhaps one day, my children want to donate those scrapbooks to the library of the Quebec National Assembly. Who knows? I have somebody saying, Chai V'Kayam, and I have Peter Safran saying, we are so proud to have you as a past president and continuous mentor and friend at the ADATH. Thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate it. I have a comment from Marisa, who says that you have accomplished much during your tenure in government, but the jewel in the crown is by far Bill 198. You have much to be proud of, Mr. B, and I'm proud to have been in your service and proud to call you a friend. That comes from a former attaché politic in my office and in my office as a minister, and I appreciate that comment. Kenny Seltzer, Lawrence, Mazel Tov on your fabulous career. You have made Jewish people very proud. Thank you very much, Kenny. I appreciate it. If there are any other questions, I will take them. So there's no other questions, and I really appreciate the time we've spent together. I hope that you're all taking good care, that you're safe and you're well, and look forward to seeing all of you soon. And I'll leave Alvin close the meeting.
Yeah. So relating, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. So relating to part of Lawrence's story, I think we should all act now like we're in the National Assembly and give Laurence a standing ovation. Thank you again, Lawrence, for a very, very interesting and informative evening. It was most enjoyable, truly, truly an amazing career. I hope all of you appreciated his story as much as I did. Again, I want to thank all of you here tonight for your support. We look forward to seeing you all again at our next ADATH lecture event, featuring someone I know very well, Ellen Delovich, who will be telling her true life story of unrelated bone marrow donation. It will be a fantastic and captivating narrative. Bring your Kleenex with you, please. I hope that you will all register to join us. Save the date of Sunday, January 17th at the special time of 3 p.m. in the afternoon. A separate registration is required for each speaker, and subsequently a new Zoom link will be sent out. Flyers will be emailed out to you during the next few weeks as a reminder. Please note that this series of life stories are open to family and friends. So please share it with them and ask them all to register as well. Good night, stay safe, and stay healthy. And thank you again, Lawrence, for an informative and wonderful, wonderful story.
My pleasure. Thank you.